Welcome back to HorrorTown, where the online world can be a terrifying place. In this edition, we bring you two true Craigslist horror stories that will keep you hooked from start to finish. Brace yourself for a chilling tale of a lost item and a kidnapping that will leave you questioning who you can trust online. It was a chilly night, and I was scrolling through Craigslist, looking for a good deal on a used car. I had been searching for weeks, and I was starting to get desperate. That's when I saw it, an ad for a car that looked perfect. It was exactly what I had been looking for, and the price was too good to be true. I clicked on the ad, and it took me to a page with more information about the car. The seller had included several pictures, and the car looked immaculate. I was hesitant at first, but I decided to send an email to the seller to get more information. To my surprise, the seller responded almost immediately. They were very friendly and answered all of my questions. They even offered to let me come see the car that night, which was unusual but seemed like a good sign. I agreed to meet them at their house, which was on the outskirts of town. As I drove there, I couldn't help but feel a little nervous. I had heard stories about people getting scammed on Craigslist, and I didn't want to be one of them. When I arrived at the house, I was surprised to find that it was in a secluded area. It was a small, run-down house with no lights on. I parked my car and got out, feeling a little uneasy. As I walked up to the door, I heard a strange noise coming from inside the house. It sounded like someone was whispering, but I couldn't make out what they were saying. I knocked on the door, and the whispering stopped. After a few moments, the door creaked open, and a woman appeared. She was wearing a dark hoodie, and her face was obscured by the hood. She looked at me for a moment before speaking. "Are you here for the car?" she asked in a soft voice. I nodded, and she motioned for me to follow her inside. As I stepped into the house, I noticed that it was pitch black. I couldn't see anything, and the only sound was the sound of my own footsteps. Suddenly, I felt something brush against my leg. I looked down and saw a rat scurrying away. I shuddered and followed the woman deeper into the house. We walked for what felt like forever before we finally reached a room with a single light bulb hanging from the ceiling. In the center of the room was the car I had come to see. It looked just like it did in the pictures, but something about it felt off. I couldn't put my finger on it, but there was something about the car that made me uneasy. I turned to the woman to ask her some more questions, but she was gone. I was alone in the room with the car. Suddenly, I heard the whispering again. It was louder this time, and I could make out what the person was saying. "Get out," the voice said. "Get out while you still can." I was too scared to move. I didn't know who was speaking or where they were. All I knew was that I needed to get out of that house as soon as possible. I turned and ran out of the room, slamming the door behind me. As I ran down the hallway, I heard footsteps behind me. I didn't know if it was the woman or someone else, but I didn't stop to find out. I burst out of the house and ran to my car. As I started the engine, I saw the woman standing in the doorway, watching me. I didn't wait to see what she would do next. I peeled out of there as fast as I could. I never went back to that house, Andy never went back to that house, and I never found out what happened to the woman or who was whispering in the darkness. But the experience stayed with me for a long time. For weeks afterward, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me, following me. I was always looking over my shoulder, afraid that someone would jump out and grab me. Eventually, I started to feel like I was going crazy. I couldn't sleep at night, and I was constantly on edge. I knew I needed to do something to get my life back to normal. That's when I decided to go to the police. I told them everything that had happened, about the online ad, the woman in the house, and the whispering in the darkness. At first, they didn't take me seriously. They told me that Craigslist scams were common, and that I had probably just been spooked by the strange surroundings. But I knew there was something more to it than that. I kept pushing, and eventually, they agreed to investigate. They traced the IP address of the person who had posted the ad, and they were able to locate the house where I had gone to see the car. When they got there, they found something even more disturbing than I had imagined. The woman who had shown me the car was gone, but they found evidence of other people who had been lured to the house by the same ad. There were cages in the basement, filled with people who had been kidnapped and held captive for weeks. The police arrested several people in connection with the crimes, but they were never able to find the mastermind behind the operation. To this day, I still have nightmares about that house and the horrors that were happening inside. I learned a valuable lesson, that you can never be too careful when it comes to online interactions. You never know who might be hiding behind the screen. After the police found the house where I had gone to see the car, I was contacted by the lead detective on the case. He told me that they had discovered evidence that suggested the people who had been running the operation were part of a larger network of criminals who were involved in human trafficking. The detective asked me to come in for an interview, hoping that I might be able to provide more information that could help them in their investigation. I agreed, but I was still scared. I didn't know what to expect, and I didn't want to put myself in danger again. When I arrived at the police station, I was met by the detective and another officer who took me to a small room where we could talk. They asked me about my experience with the online ad and the woman who had shown me the car. They wanted to know if I had noticed anything unusual or if there were any details that I hadn't told them before. I told them everything I could remember, but I didn't think it was much help. I had only seen the woman for a few minutes, and I didn't know anything about the people who were behind the operation. The detective thanked me for my time and told me that they would keep me updated on the progress of the investigation. He also advised me to be careful and to report any suspicious activity if I noticed it. Days turned into weeks, and I didn't hear anything from the police. I started to think that maybe they had given up on the case, or that they had found a dead end. But one day, I got a call from the detective. He told me that they had made a breakthrough in the case, and that they had identified one of the people who had been involved in the operation. The person they had found was a man who had been arrested for drug trafficking in another state. When they searched his home, they found evidence that linked him to the human trafficking operation. He had been using Craigslist to lure people to the house, and he had been working with a group of people who were part of a larger criminal organization. The detective told me that they were working on building a case against the man, and that they would be bringing him to trial soon. He also told me that they had found evidence that suggested the woman who had shown me the car was one of the people who had been kidnapped and held captive by the group. I was shocked to hear this. I couldn't imagine what it must have been like for her, to be forced into such a terrible situation. I felt grateful that I had managed to get out of there before something worse had happened to me. In the end, the man was convicted and sentenced to life in prison for his role in the operation. But even though justice had been served, I still felt a sense of unease. I knew that there were other people out there who were involved in similar crimes, and that it was just a matter of time before someone else fell victim to their schemes. I had learned a valuable lesson, that you can never be too careful, especially when it comes to online interactions. But I also knew that there was a larger problem at play, one that needed to be addressed on a broader scale. The horrors of human trafficking were real, and they were happening right under our noses. It was up to all of us to be vigilant and to do our part to stop it. After everything that had happened, I knew that I needed to make some changes in my life. I couldn't go back to the way things were before. I needed to be more cautious and more aware of the dangers that were out there. So, I started taking self-defense classes, and I invested in a home security system. I made sure that I never went to see anything on Craigslist without bringing someone with me, and I made sure to always meet in a public place. But even with all of these precautions, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. The horrors that I had witnessed had left a deep impression on me, one that I knew would stay with me for the rest of my life. But I was determined not to let the fear control me. I knew that there was still good in the world, and that there were still people out there who were fighting to make it a better place. So, I started volunteering at a local shelter for victims of human trafficking. I wanted to do my part to help those who had been through similar experiences to the ones that I had witnessed. And slowly but surely, I started to feel like I was making a difference. I met people who had been through unimaginable horrors, and yet they still had the strength to keep going. They inspired me to keep pushing, to keep fighting, no matter how difficult things might seem. In the end, I knew that I couldn't erase what had happened, but I could choose how I responded to it. I could let the fear control me, or I could use it to fuel my passion for justice and my determination to make the world a better place. And that's what I chose to do. I moved forward, one step at a time, always mindful of the dangers that were out there, but never letting them hold me back. The horrors of human trafficking were real, but so was the power of hope and the strength of the human spirit. And that was something that I knew would never be taken away. It all started when I lost my wedding ring. I had taken it off to wash the dishes, and when I turned around, it was gone. I searched everywhere, but it was nowhere to be found. Desperate to find it, I turned to Craigslist, hoping that someone might have found it and be willing to return it to me. That's when I came across an ad that caught my attention. It read, Found. Wedding ring. If you can identify it, it's yours. I knew that it was a long shot, but I decided to respond to the ad anyway. I sent a message explaining that I had lost my wedding ring and describing what it looked like. To my surprise, I received a response almost immediately. The person who had found the ring said that it matched my description, and that I could come pick it up from their house. I was thrilled. I couldn't believe that I was going to get my wedding ring back. I thanked the person and asked for their address so I could come pick it up. But as I drove to their house, a sense of unease started to wash over me. The address was in a seedy part of town, and the house looked run down and abandoned. I couldn't help but wonder if this was a setup, if someone was trying to take advantage of my desperation to get my ring back. But I had come this far, and I wasn't about to give up now. I parked my car and walked up to the door, knocking nervously. After a few moments, the door creaked open, revealing a dimly lit interior. I could see a figure standing in the shadows, holding something in their hand. "Is this your ring?" they asked, holding out their hand. I squinted in the darkness, trying to get a better look at the person. But I couldn't make out anything except their silhouette. "Yes," I said, reaching out to take the ring. But as soon as I touched it, the person grabbed my wrist and pulled me into the house, slamming the door shut behind us. I was trapped, with no way out. I didn't know what was going to happen next, but I knew that it wasn't going to be good. As soon as the person pulled me into the house, I knew that I was in trouble. I struggled to break free from their grasp, but it was no use. They were too strong. "Who are you?" I demanded, trying to keep my voice steady despite my fear. But the person didn't answer. Instead, they dragged me deeper into the house, down a dark hallway and into a small room that was filled with strange objects. I could see now that the person was wearing a mask, and I couldn't tell if they were male or female. All I knew was that they were determined to keep me there, and I didn't know how long I could hold out. For what felt like hours, the person interrogated me, asking me questions about my life and my family. They seemed to be searching for something, but I had no idea what it was. As time went on, I began to feel weaker and weaker. I hadn't eaten or slept in hours, and I could feel my body starting to shut down. But just when I thought it was all over, something unexpected happened. The person's phone rang, and they stepped out of the room to take the call. It was my chance. I knew I had to do something, anything to escape. I started to look around the room for anything that could help me, and that's when I saw it, a piece of broken glass on the floor. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed the glass and used it to cut through the ropes that were binding my hands. It hurt, but I didn't care. I was determined to get out of there alive. Just as I was about to make my escape, the person came back into the room. But I was ready for them. I lunged at them with the broken glass, and they fell to the ground, stunned. I didn't wait to see if they were okay. I ran as fast as I could, out of the house and into the street. I didn't stop until I was miles away, safe and sound. Later, I found out that the person who had kidnapped me was a notorious criminal who had been operating in the area for years. They had been using Craigslist to lure unsuspecting victims, and I had been one of the lucky ones who had managed to escape. It was a terrifying experience, one that would stay with me for the rest of my life. But it also taught me a valuable lesson, to be cautious when dealing with strangers online, and to always be on the lookout for potential danger. After my harrowing experience, I knew that I needed to take some time to heal and recover. I sought out therapy to help me deal with the trauma, and I surrounded myself with friends and family who could support me. But even with all of this help, I still couldn't shake the feeling of fear that had taken hold of me. Every time I saw a Craigslist ad or met someone new online, I couldn't help but wonder if they were hiding something, if they were dangerous. It took time, but eventually, I was able to move on from the experience. I learned to be more cautious, but I also learned not to let fear control me. I started to volunteer at a local organization that helped victims of human trafficking and online scams. I wanted to use my experience to help others who had been through similar situations. And slowly but surely, I began to feel like myself again. I knew that the world was a dangerous place, but I also knew that there was still good in it, and that I could be a part of that good. In the end, I realized that the experience had changed me in more ways than one. It had taught me to be more cautious, yes, but it had also taught me to be more compassionate and understanding. I had learned that there were people out there who were hurting, who needed help and support. And I had learned that I had the power to make a difference, no matter how small. So, I moved forward, one step at a time, always mindful of the dangers that were out there, but never letting them hold me back. I knew that the road ahead would be long and difficult, but I also knew that I was stronger than I had ever been before. And that was something that no one could ever take away from me. Thanks for joining us for another spine-chilling edition of HorrorTown. We hope you enjoyed this Craigslist horror story and that it reminded you to always be cautious when dealing with strangers online. If you want to see more scary stories like this, be sure to hit that subscribe button and hit the notification bell so you never miss an episode. And as always, if you have a creepy tale of your own to share, feel free to leave it in the comments below. Until next time, stay safe out there, HorrorTown fans.